Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hearing News.
Ahoy, hoy!
I'm in the middle of eating my Central Otago stone fruit. And so everyone can just wait for a while I get those finished. That'll be fine. Hey, G-Man, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm a wee bit jealous. I've had real trouble getting hold of decent stone fruit this year.
Oh, real? No, we go mad with it, man. It's like it's probably one of the biggest parts of our budget is on fruit, because with the eating plan that
I'm a fiend for apricots. I love them and just haven't seen any decent ones around.
Well, with the eating plan that I'm doing at the moment and the health kick, it's I've been very much eating I think the official term in the world of fruit is a shit ton of it. I think that's what the official term is. And tonight we've got enough nectarines that there's a few bruises coming up. So as you can see, there's been a bit cut out of it. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of eat it now. So I don't know. We'll figure it out. People like, is it ASMR? So I'll just go. Apparently that's quite sexy. Is that right?
I don't
know. No. Quite sexy. Put people to sleep. Yeah. So it's a last day of the week. I mean, this is our normal last day of the week, but for everyone, because public holiday tomorrow. As you know, that most Friday nights no, someone just says no, it's not sexy. I've got a podcast for you tomorrow night to do with the naked pasta. That's pastor, not pasta, as in he's not a edible Italian food. But it was I edited it together today, and so I find it quite interesting. Chat. You all know that I love the religious conversations, though, so it's basically partly religious, partly political, and he's very much into his vulnerable people group. And he wants to help work with them and protect them. So he's been very interested in the situation around Posey Parker and that here in New Zealand over the last couple of weeks, and that's part of the conversation we have. I don't know if I'll play your clip tonight or not. I've got one clip on my Twitter feed, but we've got like a lot going on tonight, so we may not get to that. You might just have to either tune in tomorrow evening live here as we play it out live, or get onto the Apple Podcast channel. Just look up the Department of Conversation with Pat Brittenden. And if you do that, then you'll get the audio podcast at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. Simple, Chewy. You've got a weekend off, yeah? You going away? You're telling us that you might get out of town.
Well, we thought we might do a little bit of a local road trip. Maybe head up Ranfurly, St. Bathans sort of way. Yeah, I mean, over the last year, like my partner and I haven't really shared a proper day off together, just different schedules, and this will be the first weekend we're really able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I was thinking about you actually, and I was thinking it'd probably be really good to get away and just like I've been working all this week. We had that day without power, so I've been doing doubles today. Like I recorded and edited a podcast for a client today, and I edited my podcast for tomorrow night, and I prepped for this, and now we're doing this, and I've got tomorrow off, and then on Saturday, the client who's done the recording of the podcast today is coming back, and we're editing it on Saturday for it to be uploaded on Sunday, and then it goes on. I have to record a Let's Talk Funny at some stage, so I'm not really going to stop, but I'm going to try and get a break into it. But I was thinking about you going, you're a hard worker, you work long hours, and you jump in here as well, and getting away and turning off and just spending 2-3 days doing nothing. It must be amazing. You should bloody do it, bro, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Might even be an excuse to get my my drone, which I haven't touched for ages. I figured like St. Bathans, I don't know if you know much about St. Bathans, but it's an old abandoned mine with old mining era buildings all around it. Might be a perfect place to get the drone out.
I saw I might have been a DJI drone, but there is a new sort of entry level drone with goggles I saw it the other day. And apparently we're at the point with technology now where these entry-level drones, even though they're a couple of grand or whatever, but they're entry-level, are pretty much good enough to do with anything you want. Obviously, they're not movie-making drones, and I've been thinking I might attempt to put that on my bucket list for the end of the year. Try and get me a drone with some goggles that I can then do some fun stuff with around Central Otago and Otago. It'd be good fun. So yeah,
dropping little hand grenades into people's sunroofs. Sorry, I've been watching too much about the Ukraine war.
Mostly what we're trying to be doing. Hey, thanks to all our patrons. Love having you on board. Want to say a special thanks to Stephanie Phillips, who joined us last night, as did Suzanne Russell. 2 patrons that jumped on after the show last night. We appreciate you guys. We appreciate everybody there. And you look, there's still a big red space here if someone wants to come and join in as well. If you'd like to be a part of what we do, if you'd like to help support what we do, easy way you can do that is to head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And with that, I think that we shall just get into it. I mean, you say his name 3 times. I think he turns up in the mirror behind you. If not in the mirror behind you, he certainly turns up back on Twitter. News today, Sean Plunkett's Twitter account has been reinstated after it was suspended earlier this week. I'm back, the controversial broadcaster wrote in a tweet this morning. In a second tweet, he thanked all who supported free speech, including Elon Musk. We may not always agree, but we must talk and search for understanding, Plunkett wrote. The thing that's hilarious about that is he does not search for understanding. If it's a point, and we've played so many clips now that he disagrees with, he just shouts people down and shouts after them. So it's all bullshit, really.
He's absolutely leaning on that free speech angle rather than the fact that he breached a suppression order, shared a link to a banned publication.
Did he share a link? Are you sure about that? I know that people said he directed his followers to go and read it, but that doesn't mean he actually gave it.
Your language is probably more correct there.
You got to be sure about this. We're not going to, as much as he's an onion of shit, to coin a phrase, we're not going to put out just false or fake information. So, telling people that they should go read it is different from listing a link. So we've got to be careful what we say. Not careful because I'm worried, but careful because as ridiculous as we are as human beings, I still want to be accurate and precise. That's why it's important.
He pointed people in the direction of it.
Cool. The former Magic Talk host said he is not a hateful person and said he believed his account was deactivated over a troll attack by a group of women-hating activists, but added he had no idea for certain as Twitter hasn't told him which post led to his suspension, which surprises me.
That's not true.
Yeah, it surprises me.
That's not true. They tell you exactly what posts have been reported.
Unless it's the joke you made last week about him not understanding YouTube, unless he just actually doesn't know because he hasn't figured it out or hasn't been seen it. He did suspect it was about a tweet about a New Zealander of the Year awards, which is the one here where he talked about beating up women. Obviously, he was doing it as a quote unquote joke, but maybe that's what the algorithm picked up to put it over the top. Not sure. That appeared to make reference to anti-trans activist Kelly Jane Keane-Minshall, commonly known as Posey Parker. The broadcaster had previously claimed that he believed there was mob violence at the event after a bottle of tomato juice was tipped on Keane-Minshall's head. Plunkett had attacked the awards for being woke after activist Chanel Lal, one for the Young New Zealander of the World. Lal was prominent counter-protest organizer to Keane-Minshall's arrival in New Zealand. Plunkett is the founder and editor, yada, 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 yada. Yeah, and so I thought we have to obviously acknowledge it. It's big news. I do think it's kind of hilarious that the people he's thanking, like he thinks that Posey Parker and Jordan Peterson have actively stepped in on his behalf to help him get unbanned. Like they've been speaking with Elon. It feels like it's a bit of big noting there, if you ask me. But of course, as every absolute dirtbag, shitbag would want to do, as soon as he gets back on, I mean, I don't know if you experience this, Chewie, because I've always been like one of the tallest kids in class. Yeah. So I don't really know what it feels like to be bullied, as privileged as that sounds for some people out there who experienced it. But I imagine like when the bully is away from school for, 3 or 4 days, some kids are like, oh my God, these are the best 3 or 4 days of school ever. Because as soon as the shitbag gets back on Twitter, what does he do? He goes and fires Chanel Lal's tweet, who said 3 days ago, As somebody who has been endlessly harassed by Sean Plunkett on Twitter, all I have to say is good riddance. So Sean Plunkett quoted that tweet and just said, "I'm back, buddy," like
What
every
a
arsehole would.
dickhead.
Yeah. He's back. I don't know if we ever said, "I wonder if it will stick," but I certainly thought that. I guess the idea about permanently suspended sounded like it wouldn't, but I did have that thought in my head. I wonder if he'd be back. Yeah, I don't know. And look, Guru mentioned something actually, mentioning for far better alternatives. I guess that's like Mastodon, isn't it? Like I've said a couple of times, I tried to do Mastodon a couple of times and it never really figured out. I think that was my fault, not theirs. But maybe we'll get back and I'll get back into doing it. I'll have a look over Easter at some other options. I think why we talk about Twitter most is that at the moment that's still the biggest place and the place where most people are. And it's not really the public square, but it's as close to the public square as is possible. But mind you, shortly we're going to talk about untrusted media and how much we trust them. And I was quite surprised to see how little activity happens on Twitter versus mainstream media, which is a really interesting observation. Sorry, Stuart, you go.
Yep. No, I was going to say, like, I'm on Mastodon and have been on and off it since Elon bought Twitter. And I noticed now he's put a bloody cartoon dog on there. So big changes at Twitter HQ. I think the reason that we end up talking about stuff that goes down on Twitter is it's because it's the amount of traffic that it has and everybody's there, and it's if we were talking about Mastodon, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, people being nice to each other all the time does not necessarily make it as engaging show for what we do. I love Mastodon. It's where I go to detox from social media. And it's just, I follow Star Wars accounts and a bunch of other stuff that I follow. And it's just people genuinely being nice humans. It's a nicer social media experience. Absolutely. But because of that, there is not enough drama to sustain our show.
I mean, you can have good news stories. They do have good news stories. That would be the equivalent of Mastodon. But I think the reason we talk more about Twitter than anything else is Twitter generates more news than any other social media. I mean, we have, maybe not by name, but we have talked about Truth Social as well, which is Trump's Twitter, whatever it's called, the version of it that he's running, because sometimes there's news there as well. So I think the answer to the question is, why do we always talk about it, is because at the moment that's where the majority of the news comes from that we're covering about social medias. When Mastodon or whatever else other ones start to take off and they start generating news, then we'll talk more about those. I think we just use it. I mean, when I look at the news, I go through like stuff.co.nz, I go through New Zealand Herald, I go through ODT, I have a look at I don't look at the Christchurch Press because that's stuff. I look at TVNZ, I look at News Hub, I look at News Talk ZB, I was looking at Today FM, and I go through Twitter. I do that every day to find stuff to put on the show. Now, I would do Mastodon as well if I was a part of it and if it was generating news stories, but it's not. So at the moment, I'm not. But we will. It'll grow and it'll become a part of it. Anyway.
Yeah, it just works very differently. It's not algorithm generated. So, I mean, we're so used to the algorithm delivering exactly what we're looking for. Yeah. And I mean, one of the I guess the more notable changes on Twitter that I've seen is now there's that For You feed. I don't generally have that as my main feed because it just generates rage to my doorstep. If I turn it on, I mainly get right-wing commentary, and it's just it's so cynically designed to drive rage engagement that I just switch it to people that I follow.
Yeah, I'm going to start to look at doing that as well, because it frustrates the fuck out of me when I get messages, but like in my feed from people I don't follow. I got one popped up today from Chantel Baker, for fuck's sake.
That's what I'm talking about. I get, I don't follow Sean Plunkett. I don't follow Chantel Baker. I don't follow, a bunch of the, David Seymour pops up. Winston pops up. And it's just like, I get up in the morning and I open Twitter and that's my experience. That's a bad day. If I want to go looking for what they're saying, sure, just don't deliver it to me. And I mean, as part of DIY Guru's, comment, yes, it is a dystopian echo chamber. I would freely acknowledge that. There's some good stuff that happens there. There's some uplifting stories, but Mastodon is where the uplifting stuff really is, and I genuinely enjoy the community that's on the instance that I'm on.
All right. Okay, let's have a look at this. We've talked about this 3 or 4 times since Posey Parker was here, but the protester who threw the juice has been charged with assault and has pled not guilty to assault after throwing juice on Posey Parker. The reason I struggle with that word is I don't know if you do this, Chewy, but I get confused sometimes as to what the American version is and what our version is. One of us say pleaded, and the other one said pleads, and I'm not sure. I guess we say pleads because it's there in the thing. And I remember sitting in newsrooms when someone says it's not pleaded, it's pleads, because it's apparently what we say versus the other one. I do sometimes, believe it or not, say sidewalk. I really embarrass myself when I say sidewalk rather than footpath, but it does happen. The lawyer for the woman charged with pouring tomato juice all over an anti-trans activist says the case will expose the danger of hate speech. Eli Rubashkyn poured juice on British activist Kelly J, known as Posey Parker, at a speaking event in Auckland on March 25th. King abandoned the event following the incident. I don't know, it's true, but I don't know if that was the incident that caused her to abandon the event, which is how that sounds a little bit, and then left the country. Rubashkyn, who has been charged as Eliana Galveston, was excused from appearing at her first court on Thursday, so today. Her lawyer, James Olsen, entered a not guilty plea on his client's behalf, and the case is due back in court in July. In a statement, Olsen said, the safety and rights of transgender people must be protected. We must also protect the rights to protest against those who espouse hate and discrimination. Hate speech emboldens others to use violence against them, against those in our trans community, a community already targeted and at risk. The charges will be defended and the opportunity to expose the danger of such speech welcomed. Rubashkyn was charged with assault, which, if found guilty, carries a maximum penalty of 6 months imprisonment or a $4,000 fine. The 35-year-old came to New Zealand as a refugee in 2014. She's a qualified pharmacist and researcher and an advocate for intersex and gender issues at the United Nations. She was born intersex and raised as a boy before being given access to hormones as an adult. She had gender-affirming surgery in 2022. It's interesting. Actually, we always talk about, we don't need to talk about genitals, but that's interesting that that's included in the story. I'm like, do we need to know that? But I guess, did I need to read it out? I guess I just read it out. So here's the thing, yeah. I'm quite intrigued with this whole thing. And you know, if you watched us when we talked about the actual Posey Parker situation, I was very clear. If there's been some crimes committed by protesters, then those crimes should be investigated. And we all agreed, I think we agreed, Chewy, that it appears, and I said appears, I don't know, innocent until proven guilty, that pouring a liquid on someone could be an assault. I mean, a technical definition of it. Here's my question now as well. If it is an assault, like if pouring liquid on someone is, I'll say is because I don't know the absolute legalities, what happens then when the person who's done it says this sort of thing?
Juice, Posey Parker, with tomato juice. I dropped a liter of juice on her. Why? Because she's spreading hate. The juice, because the tomato juice and the tomato soup is the same thing. Symbolizes, it's a symbol that is used by anti-fascists, to kind of symbolize this energy of fighting fascism. Okay. Because it's the soup, tomato soup is like a working class type of thing. And so it's kind of that association, because Posey Parker is definitely not middle class and not working class. It's a good way of kind of slapping in her face, her class. And I think it's time for her, to have a taste of good vitamin C and lycopene in her skin, because it's quite good. Tomato juice is quite good for your skin.
So it goes on, right? If it's an assault, and I'm saying if, because I don't know, then that's basically just an admission of guilt. And I'm intrigued as to where to from here. What are your thoughts, Chewy, about the charge and the not guilty plea? Now, actually, before we go, we have to be careful because before the courts, right, we can't be seen in any way to put anything in front of the courts or make a conclusion, which is why I'm saying if it is, I don't know. If it is, this. What do you think, Joe?
I think it's interesting. Definitely this person is making a stand.
Yeah.
Like by going not guilty, then it goes further in the legal process, and you'll have arguments and that sort of thing. I mean, you're right. You know, if the accusation was like, how could you do anything else? Because it really is like, did you do this thing? Well, yes, there's literally footage of me doing it. Whether it meets, I guess, the yardstick to be considered an assault, and also in the scheme of things, like the severity of the assault, she's not going to get months in jail or a huge fine.
No, I agree.
It's going to be, here's a half hour of community service. Like,
I agree.
Like, and as much as I wish that this one act didn't get so much of the narrative around the counter protest, I applaud her for doing it. It's like fascists and just horrible, nasty people getting milkshakes thrown at them or egged and that sort of thing. We spoke about this. It's not harmful. You know, there's someone in the chat at the moment saying, try that to a stranger at the pub tomorrow and see if they consider it an assault. Stuff like that happens in pubs all the time. People spill drinks on people. People, you know, pour drinks on people on purpose, and it might cause an assault. Like, because I've seen people throw punches after something like that. But you don't see the courts filled up on a Monday with people that have poured drinks on people's heads. Because you just get annoyed and you carry on with your day.
No, I think you're right. But the point being, just because you don't see them in court, like you don't see people in court necessarily for a punch up either, it doesn't mean it's not an assault. Let me just read this out, because I've just looked up the Crimes Act 1961. Assault means the act of intentionally applying or attempting to apply force to the person of another, directly or indirectly, or threatening by any act or gesture to apply such force to the person of another. If the person making the threat has or causes the other to believe on reasonable grounds that he or she has, and then the little thing runs out, doesn't it? She or he has present ability to effect his or her purpose, and to assault has a corresponding meaning. So that's interesting. Present ability to effect his or her purpose. What if that's to speak in front of an audience?
Look, I think back to famous creeps in history, right?
Yep.
Oswald Mosley. You've heard of him?
No, I'm not so familiar.
He founded a delightful group called the British Union of Fascists.
Okay.
During World War II, and then he had another go at it post-war. He once had a rally in Manchester and was hit in the head with a brick because he tried to do it in a working class suburb.
Mm-hmm.
That's an assault. Absolutely. Should the person be applauded? Absolutely. Did it
Look,
stop
I agree with you.
Talking?
Look, I agree with you. Look, I think most people would agree with you, but if it is technically within the law, then something could happen from it. I also agree with you. It won't be a big fine or a big sentence if she's found guilty. However, I do also wonder this, right? Let me bring up some other. This has been the last couple of weeks on Ali's Facebook and her Facebook and Twitter. I was actually speaking to Ali today. I nearly got Ali to come on the show, and then in the middle of the conversation, Ali deleted her Facebook. Her Twitter altogether. Then started another one. And I've been communicating, and they've gone from Ali saying that they would come on to the show to no, we're not doing anything because we have to get together a plan, a narrative. So obviously they're taking it more seriously. And I do wonder, here's just some examples of what's been up on Ali's, and I'm sorry, I don't know if it's Ali or Eli, but it's Eliana, so I'm assuming it's Ali.
Yeah, I've said Ali.
Twitter feed, like just, thumbing one's nose. We could use that thing, poking the bear again. And I do wonder, look, more things, by tomato plant, tomato on toast, all these things. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these, but I do wonder, this fruit kills fascists. I do wonder if on some level, the police have maybe been backed into a corner, that if this is technically an assault, and someone's going, now, 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 I'm going to do it again. Everyone should do it. That I wonder if Ali's on some level been hoisted by one's own petard. In other words, because Ali has chosen to make herself so public and gone, look what I did, look what I did, look what I did. And if that thing is an assault, I wonder if the police and the courts actually kind of have no other option other than to, put it through and see what happens. I wonder.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on this, right? I would probably be happier if she hadn't done it. But then she did, and I understand the reasons for it and the emotion behind it. And I also understand, I guess, for lack of a better word, her grandstanding around it. I think it's on one hand, enormously funny. On the other hand, she's held herself up as a target.
Totally.
And that can be an enormously brave thing to do. And I think there's a little bit of there's an aspect of this that is this, I guess, was what she did morally defensible? It's like the argument that revolves around punching a literal Nazi, right? Violence is bad. Nazis are worse. Punch a Nazi. I think in the scale of things, she poured a drink on someone. It's going before the courts. She's going to write it as, let's see how far this goes, and then the courts will make their decision, and that's it. But I have to applaud her for having the courage of her convictions, at least.
But the flip side to that statement is, if she's got the courage of her convictions, then that might come with consequences. Just like people who did sit-ins in the 60s and stuff ended up getting arrested and spending a night or two in the cells. I also think that Transky, MG's just said, this isn't a new thing. Isn't the person who threw a dildo at Joyce also an assault? Yes. And I think one of the differences, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you people in the chat always do, I think that Joyce made it very clear he wasn't going to press any assault charges. Now, I don't think anyone ever said it wasn't an assault. But see, Posey Parker spent the past 2 weeks traveling the world circuit, getting more exposure for these events. And so therefore, this is why everyone involved, at least with the organizing of these protests or counter protests, was saying no violence, no violence, no violence, no violence, because she's grifted and made back off it. And so, of course, she's going to want this to go into a court. She's going to want the scene. It was like we talked yesterday to the law professor out of Auckland. Trump could have done his arraignment over Zoom. That offer was made. He chose not to. He wanted the spectacle. Posey Parker is going to want the spectacle, going to want the exposure. So the dildo thing, so hilarious saying that out loud. But then again, also the dildo thrower didn't spend the next 3 weeks. And I'm not saying this is wrong, by the way. This is just an observation. Finding every phallic object in the land and pointing to it and bringing out her own and growing dildos in her backyard and, kind of making more of a mockery of it. So as I make this very clear, I'm not saying anything that Eliana's done is wrong to do with her grandstanding. More power to you. That's your position. More power to you. But you have definitely made yourself more of a target by thumbing your nose at the legal side of this. That's what it comes down to. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. This just means that, like, I saw some footage on Ali's Twitter feed before it was shut down, talking about disproportionate response because she was dragged off state and actually stuff was poured over her. Now, if what she's done is an assault, so is that. The difference is nobody knows who did that. So how do you charge them? Everybody knows who did the juice.
She got grabbed pretty much straight away by one of Posey's security team from memory, and same sort of thing, trying to flick what was left in the juice bottle back at her. It frustrates me no end because it's just so stupid. The whole thing's really stupid, and it's a really serious topic. I mean, I would much rather be talking about and I'll preface this by saying I haven't had time to really read it yet. But the judge's comments on why she was allowed in the country have been released. And I think this is something we should probably look at some point. Sorry, I've sprung this on you.
No, I heard Chloe Swarbrick talk about that the day after, about a genuine refugee fearing for their safety from their homeland and under duress. I haven't read it either, but the day after the protest, Chloe Swarbrick was on 1 or 3, don't know which one it was, in a panel talking about it. And so I heard a little bit about the background there as well. Yeah, so look, it's an interesting observation. The only thing I guess is that if there is a conviction, and there is, even if it's like a conviction, but whatever, $50 fine, yada yada yada, on you go. I don't know what happens legally in New Zealand to someone who is here under refugee status if they get a conviction. Can that change anything? So even though it might be a very minor situation in the courts, once you've got that on your record,
I think if you're a refugee, you can't deport a refugee.
Well, but I mean, like, that's like people who have got, cannabis possession charges from the 80s still can't travel into parts of the world because of that charge, or whatever it is. So I'm just saying there might be some downstream effects from a minor conviction charge, should that be what it is. We'll say again very, very clearly. I have no idea whether it's technically an assault or not. I guess that's what the courts are now going to decide, which is kind of, although when we did talk about this, we did kind of get called out that my trust in the courts was a bit maybe too high. But I guess my response to that was, it's the only system we've got. So we don't have an alternative at the moment. Goes to court, gets decided, then you either are happy with the outcome based on your actions or you're not. That's sort of where it's at.
I mean, we're following the story. It'll be interesting to see what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's silly. I think the whole thing is very silly.
Oh, look, there's people talking about, Guru's come out here saying Posey Parker was threatening her existence. I mean, this is now getting into sort of almost academic conversation, because it's a bit like I talked about the Waihopai 3, and the reason they didn't get found guilty of what they did to the spy base was the defense was basically, I'm allowed to commit a violent act if what I'm doing is protecting something bigger. And the example that was always given is, if the house is on fire, right, I can kick down the front door. I can break and enter to a house if it's on fire, which is a crime, breaking and entering, but I might be going in to try and see if there's people in there to save them. So I can commit a technical crime and get away with it if the purpose that I'm doing it is something else, which is, I don't know, bigger than or legal, and that'll probably be a part of their defense. And that'll be the debate, actually. Was she actually threatening her existence? Was she in danger? Was Eliana in danger? And this will be what the court goes through and decides. It actually might be, and I don't mean to sound like a kind of commentator now, just interested not in people but in the process, but it actually might be quite an interesting, I can't think of the word, precedent is the word, precedent in the courts as to what all this hate speech stuff actually means. Whether it's just the right to speak and say whatever you want, or not.
I mean, is there a defense with for assault for incitement?
Maybe. Don't know.
Because I mean, you could say, look, I poured my drink on that person because they said that I shouldn't exist or that I'm a pedophile. I was incited to something further.
Well, the normal rulings around hate speech, as I understand it, is the hate speech needs to do the inciting, not the response. You just said that she was incited to do it based on Posey Parker's words. If that seems that the incitement needs to be on the Posey Parker side. I would assume, again, not a lawyer, that if she's inciting violence, then the response can come. If she's speaking and that incites you to violence, that's sort of the other side of the same coin. I actually think, not that I thought of this too much beforehand, but I think that this might be an interesting court case and it might set a precedence. I also think, speaking of precedence, to move away a bit from that now, I don't know if you've noticed, but all over the world now, people are kind of mimicking and copying what happened at Auckland to shut down people's speech that they don't want to hear. Now, people are going to rally against that. What? Shutting down speech? It's like, yeah. It's like you've got speech with a microphone. You've got 1,000 people who've got speech who want to use theirs over yours. Everyone's got free speech. Everyone's got speech in that situation. But it's happening all over the place now. Those sort of, pots and pans and tubas and air horns and that kind of stuff are turning up to these speeches. I haven't got it tonight, but I see Marjorie Taylor Greene was holding a rally around the Trump thing, and she had to leave because got shouted over. So I don't know whether Auckland was the precedent for that entirely, but it seems that maybe because of Auckland, that's going to be going around more and more and more. People have found a way, and that without violence, you can do that without violence. No one needs to push or shove or shout, right? Or shout's wrong. No one needs to push or shove or hit or splash or throw. but they found a way that they can use their speech over someone else's should they want to. And I wonder if that will start to grow more.
So funny thing about that Marjorie Taylor Greene thing.
Yep.
I was watching. So a big part of the noise that meant that she couldn't or didn't stick with her speech was whistles. And apparently there was a Trump supporter in that crowd going around giving out whistles to people for free to make some noise for Trump. And the unintended side effect was that the Marjorie Taylor Greene couldn't be heard. And I love that for her.
I love that for her. All right, let's move on, shall we? We've got a few other things to get to tonight. Matthew Hooton has said that his opinion, Labor might be in the driving seat. They're my words, not his. Polls tell a happy story for Labor. March quarter results are in. After all the drama since mid-January, the red team is up just 1.75 points and the blue down 2.1. But it makes all the difference. Before Christmas, National Act are on track to form a government with a seat to spare. One way of looking at the March quarter is that Jacinda Ardern's resignation and Chris Hipkins' elevation have served to only get Te Pāti Māori the balance of power. Labour worries and national hopes that the Te Pāti Māori President John Tamahere may want to launch Winston Peters-style talks with both major parties, but it's more difficult than ever to imagine ACT being prepared to support a national Te Pāti Māori government, even if Te Pāti Māori co-leaders Debbie Ngaruapaka and Rawiri Waititi were prepared to deal with Christopher Luxon. Today's TPM supporting a national ACT government is out of the question. And then here is the poll results. I think this might be a poll of polls. This is December 2022. And you can see that National and ACT are on 47.13. Labour, Greens and Māori are on 44.73. So that was, what is that, 5 months ago? Nearly 6 months ago, 4, 5, 6 months ago. Through to the poll of polls now. And it has National ACT on 45, Labour, Greens, Māori 46.5, 45, 46.5. So whilst those results and those differences are within margin of error, yeah, I mean, you see the Greens are dropping 2 there, 2-ish there. Labour is going up sort of 4, so they're obviously eating up the Greens a little bit. ACT is pretty much steady. National's dropping 2. And Te Pāti Māori is pretty much staying the same as well. So it's an interesting time looking at what's happening. Interesting that now I think it's well known that Matthew Hooton, my words, sort of hates Christopher Luxon for whatever reason. But yeah, the way I read that, which is why I've put the heading out, that Labour's in the driver's seat at the moment. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I would agree. Yeah, Hooton does not like Luxon, but also Hooton has backed, what is it, 2 or 3 losers at this point in the National Party? Is Judith Collins press secretary or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hooton doesn't always get it right. But I think on general terms, yeah, he's probably on the right track here. But yeah, just there needs to be a bit more cohesion from someone. Like, it's been a very shaky couple of months for all political parties, to be honest.
Yeah.
Labour
instability,
haven't had a clear runway.
Yeah, instability. It feels like it's volatile. Feels like that. It feels like that maybe one. It's like, no, I'm not going to use a sporting analogy. I feel like one wrong move and one party could take off or slump. I wonder if everyone's a bit walking on eggshells.
Hey, I saw even today cracks of the Green Party. Did you see that?
Calling her a crybaby.
Oh, who's jumped into the wrong chat? That was hilarious. I don't know if you've seen the footage, but people reacting live in the chamber to getting that message.
No, haven't seen that.
Oh, there's footage of Golra's pulling out her phone, looking at it, and then going, "Oh,
really?" Oh, look, it's all. I mean, yeah, this election is on. I mean, all this year. Last year we were saying it's Nationals to lose, and now we're saying it's on. And I don't think there's anything new to that, because even if you look at those parties, if all of those parties were within margin of error, then either of those, the big ones, could be winning this year. And I think Simon Wilson's article that we referred to a few times from the New Zealand Herald, when he was talking about this could be the sort of most regressive politics we've ever had this year. basically meaning it seems to be the first time that ACT could get over the line with National with no other third party to be a handbrake. And at some stage, it looked like if the Greens can get over the line with Labour, there'll be no third party as a handbrake either. And if that's the case, ACT would have massive power because they'd basically be making the government, or the Greens would have massive power. So for those people who are voting for the minor parties, and for those people who are thinking, I'm not talking down to Pāti Māori, I like them, and Debbie's coming on our Friday night show in the next few weeks.
Nice.
But, and David Seymour as well, we've had a couple of confirmations. But what it means is, if you want a Labour Green government, then you should vote for Labour or Greens. Likewise, if you want an ACT national government, mind you, there's not really a third party to go over there, unless you were going off to the kind of, one of the fringe parties, the Freedoms Outdoor, then you should vote for National or ACT. If you want a three-headed monster, as someone said in the text before, then yeah, spread it around, babies, and we'll see what happens. Also interesting, and we had that conversation 2 weeks ago with the leader of TOP, and I'm still confused about that whole thing because TOP has already announced that they are going to sit in the oppositional benches, no matter what, that they're not going to form a government should they get in. And so if there's a hung parliament, in other words, if let's say whatever the iteration is, let's say that Labour and the Greens and National and ACT can get to 46% each, and let's say Pāti Māori had 3%, so no matter how they slice it, it can only be 49%, and then TOP does get in on 3% or 2%, that actually means that TOP has all the power, because if they're going to sit across the bench and just pass through what they call good policy, that means that 2 or 3 MPs out of TOP can make every bit of legislation either go through or not. And I said that to their leader. I said, look, you need to convince me of what you consider to be good, good policy or bad policy, because if I'm trusting you to decide what's good or bad, then I need to be really clear on what you think.
I mean, I've been impressed by some of the things that TOP have had in the past, but it's all been theoretical because they haven't got even within a sniff of getting it. But yeah, I kind of, this comes back to the talk of lowering thresholds and stuff like that. And I think there is a convincing argument to drop the threshold for parties getting in under MMP. Maybe 4% is a little bit too much. But then again, you run the risk of New Zealand First and the resurgent rise of Winston Peters from the grave.
Look, I enjoyed my chat with Ruff Mungie, and some of the stuff they said I really liked. I just don't know, because I don't know this political party. I haven't decided where I'm going to vote, but I don't know if I could vote for a party who says no matter what happens, we're going to sit in opposition. I'm like, well, I want my vote to form a government. I don't want my vote to stop a government. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
but we'll see. We're going to have Raf back again when they release their policies. So, yeah. Sorry, Simon. That's fair. I mean, I'm saying opposition, but yeah, on the crossbenchers.
And
No. Hang on, stop. He never said to me that they would offer confidence in supply. He said very clearly to me it would be a case-by-case scenario. Confidence in supply basically means you're offering your votes to a government. He didn't say that. If that's what you're meaning, Simon, he didn't say they would offer a vote to the government. He said that they would allow good policy to go through and bad policy not. So I don't know if that's correct. I'll check that, and maybe we can look at that next week, Simon. But fair, crossbenchers is a better way of saying rather than opposition. Fair. Yeah. But crossbenchers still means not in government.
The Greens did confidence in supply for a bit, didn't they?
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to keep trucking because we've got some other things to look at today. This came out earlier this week, but because we've had, both a short week and a short week, it's kind of gone to the wayside a little bit. This is AUT. They do this every year, a Trust in News survey. AUT Research Centre for Journalism, Media and Democracy, IMED, has published its third Trust in News and Aotearoa New Zealand report, authorised by Dr. Maya Milhani-Tati, I apologise, and Dr. Greg Treadwell. I love Treadwell because wasn't Treadwell part of Jason Bourne? Wasn't that Treadwell?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I love it.
Treadwell program. Treadstone.
Oh, it's Treadstone. Okay.
Yeah.
The report, based on survey responses of more than 1,000 New Zealand adults, which is a massive number for a survey, finds that in 2022, New Zealanders' trust in news and news brands continued to fall at an alarming rate. Shall I give you some headlines? New Zealanders are very interested in the news. 22% of those surveyed have paid for the news, and 36% have financially supported news organizations. Oh, Patreon. Yet trust in the news and news brands is eroding. Paradoxically, one of the main reasons for distrust in the news media appears to be the government funding. Where does that come from? Of it. A large number of respondents now perceive media as an extension of the government, hence it is seen as untrustworthy. And this year, journalists have been increasingly under attack when reporting on COVID crisis, vaccinations, vaccine mandates, and protests. In its role as disseminator of vital information in a crisis of the media has perhaps been seen as the government mouthpiece in one sense. It has quite rightly been, says Dr. Greg Treadwell, co-author of the report. Now, I'm going to show you a bunch of the graphs in this report because there's some quite interesting stuff. Before we do that, what do you reckon, Chewy? I mean, it's hardly surprising.
No, I don't think it's surprising. I think the first thing that I think of, right, is the problem that the government tried to solve with the Public Interest Journalism Fund, right, is that these organizations that used to rely on advertising, they're not getting the funding through because the information is so more freely available, whether it's good or not, and good information or not, is so freely available that they aren't getting the advertising dollars in. You know, if you can just jump on YouTube and the money goes overseas or whatever, but it's why these, like the ODT has so much stuff behind a paywall now.
Very new though, isn't it? Them doing that. It's only just happened.
And people don't like it. I don't like it. You know, I get a headline from the ODT and I go, oh, that sounds like a good story. Oh, you've got to be a subscriber. And I'm like, well, fuck you. So I'm just as guilty of what I'm saying here, is that people haven't found a funding model for the news.
Yeah. Patreon. Sorry.
But I mean, that's the thing. It's like ODT's put up a subscriber thing. You might as well say that that's their version of Patreon, right?
Yeah.
But it's not appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
They're just knocking more and more stuff behind a paywall. The Herald's done a similar thing, and it's really hard to predict the sort of stuff.
But to their credit, what the Herald has done, and I do pay for the Herald, what they've done is they've put a huge amount of opinion behind the paywall and all the news in front of it. And I think, fine, you're paying for opinion. You know, that's where that Matthew Hooton blog was that we were just reading. That's behind the paywall, right? And I think that's a perfectly good model, is that the news is in front of the paywall, and I think ODT is doing a little bit of both. And the opinion is behind the paywall, and if you want the opinion, you get it, and if you just want the news, you can go to their front page. I don't see a problem with that. I mean, I don't see a problem with anyone. People can do whatever they want for actually, you know, supporting the work they do, whether it's charging a newspaper, charging a subscription because you're on Sky TV or whatever it is. They got to pay for it somehow. If the subscriptions are dropping of the newspaper, then you come and get it digitally for, you know, half or a third the price, whatever.
And that's the problem, right? The media was the one that would tell you what went on in a meeting.
Yep.
Or they'd read the press releases and sort of put it out there for everyone to see what was going on. And now we don't necessarily have that because they're struggling to fund it all. You know, what was it? TVNZ's reporter for the entire South Island has resigned and they don't have a replacement for him.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that that we haven't really solved a problem. And the government came in, and I think with good intentions, just went, well, we're gonna help fund public interest journalism. That's a good thing for us to do. And it's the timing was terrible.
Well, but I think that's the double-edged sword. You know, we talked last night about the politics, Jacinda's politics of being kind in an unkind time. It's like the reason that public interest journalism fund had to happen was because COVID wiped out all the advertisers. So because COVID wiped out all the advertisers, either all of those institutions would have shut down or they would have got some government grants and funding. So it was the worst time for it to happen, but it had to happen at that time, the double-edged sword, you know. It wasn't like it wasn't like all those companies were flush with money from advertising and then the government threw more money at them. It was because either that or we would have lost a bunch of media outlets disseminating the news to us on a daily basis, and we would have been left with some of those horrific groups that are funded offshore or by things like Voices for Fuckwits, giving us news because the mainstream media once fell down. One of the lessons here, Chewy, is actually the money that is spent in mainstream media is ludicrous.
Yeah.
What people can do independently, I'm not saying to the standard of production values, but like right now we're sitting in front of 4K cameras talking to you in broadcast studios. It's not a big entry point anymore to be able to do it. And I was watching something from CNN as well. They had 80,000 viewers in prime time, 80,000 for the key demographic, right? Think about Today FM, let's be fair, between $5 and $9 million to set it up. You know, broadcasters, presenters getting paid $200,000-$300,000. We could run a staff of 3 or 4 for probably Tova and Duncan Garner's salaries alone. We could have 3 or 4 full-time people putting out, so because maybe the model is more now needing to be, let's stop looking at paying these guys millions and paying them a good fair wage, but maybe the model is broken when it comes to how much it costs to do things. When in this day and age, you don't need to pay that much to do things like they were. Like, I mean, we could be broadcasting on the radio right now live from our house. There doesn't need to be a studio. There doesn't need to be a studio worth $5 million.
Yeah, I want to highlight a comment that's come up in the chat, because I think it's a sentiment that I've seen around, and I think it's worth talking about a little bit. It's not about what they do cover; it's about the lack of coverage of many stories, especially anything that paints New Zealand media of government in a bad light. I think I've read that right. This perception that the media is somehow beholden to the government of the day, I just don't think stacks up. My criticism there is, like, yes, a lot of the news is light, as you've described further on. It's not news, it's entertainment. And my argument in a lot of the media is that they try to distill stuff down into a too short soundbite or a pithy comment and then move on to something else. There's not enough time being spent. People aren't being interviewed as much as they probably should be. The morning shows are really bad for that. But I don't think we're at the point where you've got an absolutely tamed media in New Zealand.
It's just a stupid statement. It's an unintelligent statement from someone. I mean, I was going to say no disrespect. I'm not trying to jump on you. Anyone who makes that statement is just an unintelligent statement from someone who doesn't understand media and has a bias of their own that can't see past the end of their own nose. I've done this. We've done this a dozen times. I'm going to do it right now. I haven't pre-prepared this, so it might end up blowing up in my face. But every time you go to the news and you start going through the past month of news stories, there's always a shit ton of negative stuff about Labor and the government. News Talk ZB spends all of their time, and guess what? There's public funding at News Talk ZB, shit talking the government. The breakfast show on the AM show, the drive show on News Talk. It's just such utter nonsense that the government, that the media won't broadcast sort of negative stories about it. Nanaima Hooter, Three Waters, Nash. It goes on and on and on and on and on. Where are your answers? What's going on? Why is there no policy? It goes on and on and on. So I'll bring this up. I haven't looked at this. So, this may prove me wrong in this instance. Even if it does, I'll probably be fair to say if we did this in a month's time, it'll be different. Let's bring up the stories from the last couple of months. Okay, talking about the OCR, talking about the crybaby moment, talking about government merger canned. That doesn't sound very good for the government. New broadcasting strategy. In fact, there's another one. The merger got slammed all over the government, all over the time. Lots about Jacinda, obviously, because she's just gone. A punch in the gut, the OCR. Labor's getting blamed for the OCR and inflation at the moment. More about Ardern, because obviously she's just gone. Scrapping the media merger, big thing about that. I'm not going to talk about Jacinda because obviously that's all to do with there. Kerry Allen apologizes for comments. That doesn't sound very good about the government. And look, this is the first story about national. Hipkins defending criticism from Campbell. It's like, I don't understand how people can. I've been through 15 stories, and probably 4, 5, 6 of them were negative about a Labour person or a Labour government. Probably 4, 5, 6 of them were kind of neutral, and the rest were about Jacinda and how lovely she is because she's leaving Parliament. It's just a stupid thought, because yes, there are biased journalists. Yes, there are biased commentators. At least what we do is we tell you where we're sitting, right? So we put ours on our sleeve. But the media is a conglomeration of people with different opinions, and you get all opinions shared out. There might be more left-wing journalists. I'm not going to dispute that fact. But even journalists who are left-wing and identify themselves that way, like Simon Wilson, we've already talked about him, says when he's doing journalism, it's straight down the line. When he's doing opinion, it's based on where he sits politically and stuff as well. That's my words, not necessarily.
I mean, I think there's far too much opinion out there, and I realize that that's exactly what we do. But yeah, I think the media, the news media in general, is very critical of whatever government is in.
Of course, makes the headlines.
Left or right, Labour or National, they're always very critical, and
that's their bias. That's the media's bias, is making money and commercial. If it bleeds, it leads. If it's bleeding out of National, they will talk about it massively. If it's bleeding out of Labour, they will talk about it massively. There are ideologues in the media, yes, but management of media, if you then go to the level above them, full of right-wingers, full of people who just are about profits and profit-driven. That's what it's about.
I think if I had a criticism, I wish that, and again, for whoever the opposition is, when they come out with a statement saying, hey, look, we think the government bad and we do this good, that there would be more digging into the whys and wherefores. But then again, you're going to run into the prevarication of like, well, we're not going to tell you how we're going to do it. So, I mean, that's just the constant interplay of the media with politicians.
Yeah. The podcast that's going to play this time tomorrow night, talking to the naked pastor, he says something really interesting. I'm going to paraphrase it. I haven't got the quote in front of me. But he says it's pretty obvious that the left make policy and the right respond to the left policy. And I thought, that's a really interesting thought. I'm going to have to mull on that a bit longer. But it doesn't feel too out of, pun, but left field to think that way. Is that the left, that's why they're called progressives. They try and progress policy, and the right respond to that by either supporting it, being neutral on it, or shooting it down. I mean, there's very little, actually, it's probably unfair to say this because we're coming into the election cycle now. It'll be interesting to see how much unique and new policy come out of the right versus how much come out that says, that sucks, we're going to do this. In other words, it's responding to that.
I also have big problems with people that talk about how all journalism is biased or all media journalism is terrible. There are reporters and news organizations out there doing phenomenal work.
Yeah.
And so it's that whole thing of like, just don't chuck everybody in the same bucket. There are people that we will dunk on all day long. There are conflicts of interest that we've pointed out in the past. But yeah, it worries me when trust in the media has gone that far south for what I would consider really sketchy reasons. So
let's have a look at this exact question, and this is what we're talking about from the media. The news media in New Zealand are independent and undue political or government influence most of the time. 6% of people strongly agree with that. 26% tend to agree. Yeah, it's tiny. 26 tend to agree. So in other words, you only got a third of people who agree that New Zealand media are independent from undue political or government influence most of the time, only a third of the country. But then you've got nearly half, 43%, who either tend to disagree or strongly disagree. Let's have a look at some other numbers that have come in here as well. So this is the trust in news media since 2020, and you can see since 2020, overall trust in news has dropped by 11%. It's currently sitting at 42%. This is a weird one. Trust in the news I use is only at 53%. So I'm using news that I'm like, yeah, I read it, but I don't trust that. I find that one peculiar. Trust in news and search, about a quarter, 25%. Trust in news and social, that's social media, I guess, about 14%. And then there's this one here, which is more specific to do with actual sources of news. Sources of news in the past week. So this is where people have got their news from. And this is what I was talking about, the Twitter bit, Chewy. So 2/3 of people have gotten news in the past week from TVNZ. 6 out of 10 from Stuff, nearly 6 out of 10 from Facebook, half of people from TV3 or News Hub, under half from NZ Herald. And then it goes down to the radio station RNZ. That's interesting that's rated much more highly than like ZB or anything else, right? 1/3 of people have gotten news from RNZ. 1/3 of people have gotten news from YouTube. Hi, YouTube. 1/4 of people have got it from other online sources. About 1/5 of people from Facebook. Commercial radio. So look, that's interesting, eh? 1/3 of people have got it from RNZ, but only 20% of people have got it from commercial radio. That includes, for this survey, Today FM and News Talk ZB and all other commercial radio stations, which is surprising to me. Printed newspapers about the same. So printed newspapers and commercial radio is only 20%, 1 in 5. Alternative news sites, here we go. Instagram, 18%, and Twitter, only 17%. So when I saw that, I'm like, that's really interesting, because that means, we were talking about this earlier, to do with about Twitter and why we talk about it. According to the survey that's been done, 17% have got news from Twitter in the last week. That probably shows a little bit about our echo chamber, because I get a lot of my news from Twitter because I use it as a source. I want to also have a look at this. This is the ODT story.
This is an interesting one. Yes.
This is the ODT stories that they put up. So they're telling us, people, that they should trust us for accuracy and balance. ODT tops rankings. And I'll read the actual quote from it. Editor-in-chief of the ODT, Barry Stewart, who won't be there much longer, I think he's resigned, was delighted. He was delighted the newspaper had held and improved its reputation for fair and balanced reporting. There has perhaps never been a time when journalism is more important and when there is a need for robust and scrutinizing media. You know that ODT Allied Press gets public money, just so people know. So, maybe because they're seen as the cute younger cousins at the bottom of the South Island. Journalism at the ODT and Allied Press community titles and at other media organizations around the country strive every day to tell the truth about what is happening. We do this so readers can make their own minds up about the performance of, say, a council or government or organization, or the suitability for office of a prime minister, a local body councillor, a chief executive, or community leader. Now, just quietly, and I know Barry a little bit, and so I don't mean any offence to him. To me, that's absolute horseshit, because this is this Fox News thing. We tell both sides, you decide. It's like, actually, sometimes there's a right and a wrong. Sometimes actually saying this is wrong, not just putting out. And I'm not. Maybe he's not saying it quite as black and white as I'm portraying, but sometimes actually allowing people to make up their own minds, as Orwellian as this sounds, is the wrong thing to do. If something is overtly wrong, evil, bad for people, bad for whatever, then that should be reported as well, not just left up to people to decide for themselves. That's how you get people who are actually thinking that we've become vaccinated and we're becoming magnetic because of it, because we've just let people decide for themselves. Our facts, you decide. News stories are written by reporters whose modus operandi is to act independently and objectively, fairly accurately, and in a balanced way. It goes on to say more of that. Now, the point that I think you're alluding to, Chewy, was notice nowhere in this story does the ODT actually say how much that they're ranking. Because you say tops ranking. So what? They're A+, they're A, they're A-. They're 9 out of 10. We're loving all that. So we should have a look at the numbers, Chewy. And here they are. Yes, look, the ODT is up there near the top. But out of 10, people trust them 5.3. So
and it's a big decline on the last
decline of 11%. So they're trusted about a C. If it was an old school grade A, B, C, D, about a C, 50%. So it's actually, yes, they can claim to being up the top with RNZ, but actually it's pretty piss poor. If you only averagely trust your news media outlet, that's not a good result. It's just not, Chewy.
But it's that classic thing, right? Is just report the stats that look good, and don't give it any context. And coming from a news organization that's saying you can trust us, that's not great.
Yeah. All right. Let's. Is there anything in the chats you want to get to? I'm going to play one last thing. It's unfortunately we've just found out that Christopher Luxon can't do maths. I don't know why. Because he used to run an airline. You might not have known that, Chewy. He used to run an airline. I hadn't heard that till this afternoon.
I hadn't heard that. Word on the street.
Yeah. So shall we get into this? Maybe you can have a look at the chat while I'm playing this other clip. So here's a clip of Twitter. 17% of us go to Twitter for our news. So this is yesterday. This is the leader of the opposition coming out of the House, where they've been talking about the OCR going up by 0.5%. It's really important for you to listen to the number he talks about when it comes to people paying back their mortgages. Here's Christopher Luxon.
Well, hi everyone. Listen, just come out of Parliament, and of course the big news is that we've actually got another 0.5% increase in interest rates happening here in New Zealand. It's our 11th increase in, I think, over 18 months. Here's the deal. If you've got an average mortgage of, say, $400,000, you're going to be paying an extra $300 a week. That's going to be a lot of pain for New Zealanders who are trying to work out how they manage to make that payment and keep their house. Not managing inflation has led to high interest rates from this government. High interest rates are now slowing down the economy, and it's going to lead to unemployment. That's why if you care about the New Zealand people, you run this economy well and you have good economic management.
Now, I'll come back to the maths in a second. Here's my question. Every economist says that for this country to get back on track, and if you saw us last night, I had a bit of a rant about the poorest being the ones that suffer the worst in this, but every economist that we know of has been saying the way to fix the economy is to raise interest rates and to have more unemployed people. Now, the leader of the opposition is saying this is terrible. Interest rates are going up and it's going to lead to more unemployment. So does that mean that Christopher Luxon and the National Party disagree with every single economist out there that says the way to get inflation back under control is to raise interest rates and have more unemployed people? Now, I don't like that myself. I'm not saying that, more unemployed people.
That's a bad idea.
No, but that's what all the economists are saying. So therefore, Christopher Luxon is saying they're all wrong. Is that what I'm getting from that, Chewy? That's the first part.
Maybe he's coming around to our way of thinking.
Next, you're going to be saying he'll be talking about nationalising things. The second thing I really want to look at, he said very clearly, an average mortgage of $400,000 will go up by, Chewy, do you remember how much per week? $300.
300. Hang on.
He
Wait,
said,
what? No.
Okay. That's what he said.
No.
Do I need to play it back for make sure we're right?
300 a week.
That's what he said. Look, we can even see it going past. Here's the deal he said.
If you've got an average mortgage of, say, $400,000, you're going to be paying an extra $300 a week.
So that's with 0.5% interest rise. Christopher Luxon, leader of the opposition, the business party, has put on Twitter, as part of their lead up to the election, that 0.5% interest rise on a $400,000 mortgage is going to lead to an extra $300 a week. I thought to myself, that doesn't quite sound right.
It's making my brain itchy, Pat.
So here's a look, right? I'm on a 2-year mortgage, so I thought I'd pick this one. And I'm even being generous and saying I don't think the rates have gone up today. Let's say they're going to go up tomorrow by 0.5%. 6.54% for 2 years where is this? Westpac. I'm not with Westpac, but I just picked one because it's a nice big pitch for everyone to see. So that means right now, if you're on a 30-year mortgage, 6.54%, right, we'll be paying back $585 a week. We got that?
Yep.
$585 a week. Now, Christopher Luxon has just said a 0.5% increase, it will raise by $300 a week. So 6.54 going to 7.05 should be $985. What is it? $616 a week.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So Christopher Luxon can't do maths. Or what he's not telling us, right? Or what he's not telling us is this justification is, if for some reason you chose to go from a 30-year mortgage at $400,000 to $580 a week, and then you thought, just for shits and giggles, let's change it to a 14-year mortgage. That's not even right, because it should be $985. So let me go here. Oh, there we go. It's more like that. Okay, for shits and giggles, let's change it to a 12-year mortgage. Then you get close to is it 300? I'm more lost now. Oh, it's 300. It was 300. Then you get close to a $300 a week increase. So if someone can explain to me how Christopher Luxon, the party of business, the party who says they're going to look after the economy better can find $300 a week on a 0.5% increase, I would appreciate being educated, because I done the maths and it don't fucking work.
Has anybody else mentioned this yet?
Don't know.
Will anyone else mention this?
Oh no, because the mainstream media is biased to it. They're favouring national. They never criticize. They never criticize national. That's just what it's all about. But it's like, what are you fucking talking about? A 0.5% increase. And JK's talking about maybe he meant, or I think he meant rent increases, but that's not what he said. That's not what he said. He said an average mortgage of, say, $400,000, you're going to be paying an extra $300 a week. He didn't say in rent. He just said for the mortgage, you'll be paying $300 a week. $30 a week is what the answer is. So what we're saying, every prediction from now on for Mr. Luxon, we have to assume he's out by a factor of 10, because that would make sense. So he's got the decimal point in the wrong place. So rather than being $30 a week, he said it's 300. So when he says the government's wasted $1 million, what he actually means is they've wasted 100,000, because he's out by a factor of 10. Maybe that's the answer.
Oh, it's. I was thinking about this the other day about something else that National put out on social media, right? Is they've got this real, we're the party of the economy, the party of business, the party of law and order, all of these things, right? And it's just not backed up by anything.
Not even math.
Like, I still remember like the financial hole that they had in their budget of, what was it, like $40 million financial hole or something, or even bigger than that. It's like, why do people still think they're good at this stuff?
Yep. And look, I haven't heard anyone else pick up on that. And let me just say this and be really blunt with you. That's why you need to get behind independent news, not mainstream news. That's why people need to get on board and say, we like what you guys are doing. You guys are finding this information. We are on some level giving you information to use in your own daily life. I will turn what we've just done into a little clip. You can share it onto your Facebook pages. You can share it around, and we can put the truth out there. $30 a week, not $300 a week. Not saying $30 a week is a sweet as, no problems, but let's be fucking accurate. Just like I said to Chewy at the start of this show, I don't care about shitting on people, but I want to be accurate and I want to be precise. Right? We just did the math. You just saw me do the math. On $400,000, it's $30 a week. Now, you may not be able to afford that $30. It might be the straw that broke the camel's back for you financially. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying it's now accurate. Now you know. Now, obviously, if you're on a 20-year mortgage, it's going to be different. If you're on a 15-year, but you have to change your mortgage by about 15 years. So if you're on a 20-year mortgage, you probably have to go to 5, 6, 7, 8 years to make the jump $300. And who's doing that? Who's going, oh, you know how times are getting tougher, Chewy? Well, I think what I'll do is I'll come off my 25-year mortgage and for shits and giggles go to a 10-year mortgage, because Mr. Luxon told us it was $300 a week. So I better make sure that I change it $300 a week because he speaks the truth.
It's like in video games, man. Sometimes you want to tweak the difficulty up.
Hey, big thanks to our patrons, Stephanie Phillips and Suzanne Russell, who joined last night straight after the show. We will not be here on Monday night. It is Easter weekend. I hope you all go and have yourself a very chocolatey Easter. This time tomorrow night, you'll be getting a podcast from the Naked Pastor. Don't panic. He's fully dressed. It is a slightly more religious conversation, but obviously he because it's Easter Friday, but he's mostly talking about his activism in areas of like the LGBT community, the trans community, but we do talk about church and what's happening in that world and stuff at the moment, and why the example given in 2023 to what the Jesus follower is a conservative Christian and American, as opposed to the fucking radical that biblical character actually was. So thank you. And look, there's a lovely little red name down there where your name could go if you decide that you want to come along and join and support what we're doing. If you would like to be a part of that, then you can head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. We love you all to bits. Remember, if you join up, you become 22% more interesting straight away. If you're one of those people who goes to a party and you're boring, maybe if one of your partners is boring, then you could be our patron, put their name in place, and they will instantly become 22% more interesting. Going to take your dog with you this weekend? I'm taking it.
Numbers and stats. Yes, absolutely, because we can't leave her behind. She's only little.
Yeah. But there's no snow. The best ones are when you take it to the snow. That's the best.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The last couple of years we've taken her up to Queenstown where there's been decent snow and just thrown her in a snowbank, and it is hilarious.
All right, we're done, team. We'll see you Tuesday night from 9 p.m. Have a really safe weekend. People are on the roads. Be super safe out there as well. It's the time of year where people, come up against idiots on the road and that sort of thing. People traveling for the last sort of weekend of summer, even though summer's over, but the last sort of weekend away before winter kicks in. Appreciate you all being with us tonight. Love you to bits, and we will see you Tuesday night for another edition. You might see me though tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Remember, you could also go to Department of Conversation with Pat Brittenden on Apple, and you will get that Naked Pastor podcast tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. You should get up for it. Actually, get up and set your alarm for 5 a.m. so you can get it straight away. That would be good. And other than that, I guess we're done for the weekend, shall we?
Absolutely.
Be safe, everyone. Chocolate. Go eat some chocolate. We'll catch you Tuesday night. Hooroo.